The fossil fuel industry has a very strong interest in not carrying out a green transition. And they also have very strong marketing strategies for swaying public opinion and political opinion to be against the green transition. If you are a family owner and you purport to care about the next generation and the longevity of your business, you absolutely have to look into the green transition, because otherwise there won't be any business or any economy to hand over to the next generation.
You can look at the footprint, so the negative impact that you might create, which is often the case no matter how sustainable your business is. But then you can also try to emphasize the positive, the solutions that can kind of maybe bring some of the boundaries back. So that's the first thing you have to decide. You can't really do a ticking the box exercise with this one, I would say.
Earlier this year, I was on the road, and one of the highlights was co-hosting the LP Summit at Arctic 15 in Helsinki. In that room, we tackled the future of climate investing at a time of ESG fatigue and political backlash. Why should you as an investor tune in? Because beyond the headlines, this is where the real conversation is happening on how value is being redefined, not just in what we invest in, but how and why. I was joined by two remarkable leaders, Anna Herlin, Vice Chair of Security Trading, representing the fifth generation of Finland's most notable industrial family behind the KONE legacy, and Dr. Krista Halttunen, CEO of Halton Ventures, where she is transforming her family enterprise into a force for sustainable innovation. Together, they reveal what catalytic capital truly looks like in the next economy and how climate investing is far from being dead. Enjoy!
To the exciting bit of today, where we will be talking about climate. In a world of ESG fatigue and backlash against climate, the question is, what next? And to join me, I love to invite two phenomenal women that are leading their families in sustainable innovation and thinking about investing for the future. Anna Herlin, of course, from the family legacy of KONE, and Vice Chair of Security Trading, Dr. Krista Halttunen from Halton Ventures, where she is building the future of her family, investing into startups, into innovation, and all that is in the built environment. So to get us started here, I think we all know the reality that, that's been record outflows from ESG funds. There's talk on political backlash against a lot of these ESG investments. Let's get started with who you are and why you're so fascinated by this very topic. Anna.
So my name is Anna Herlin, and indeed, why am I here and who am I? Is it both questions? I come from a family legacy of four previous generations, so me being the fifth generation of an industry-owning family of KONE, which is an elevator and escalator company. So I represent the owners, no role in the operative company. So I'm kind of in charge of the family office where we do investments then outside KONE, and then also I'm the operative family member of a family philanthropy that we founded some 11 years ago called the Tiina and Antti Herlin Foundation, where we do strictly climate and almost entirely strictly steel sector decarbonization through philanthropy. So maybe from that you can already guess that we're kind of have received our fair share of information about climate, about the sort of the state of the health and the stability of the planet, which is worrying. And then this is sort of where I'm coming from with the investments and with the philanthropy.
Yeah, love it. And of course, you have said that the ecological crisis will be the biggest market failure of our lifetime, and we'll get into that. But someone that shares your view is our good friend, Dr. Krista, who moved back to Finland from the UK to drive the family business. Tell us a little bit more about your view now as CEO of Halton Ventures.
I love this, Dr. Krista. I'm going to start calling you Dr. Krista after this.
Thank you so much, Sarah. I was going to say, you don't need to call me Dr. Krista. So I know I have it on my LinkedIn, but it's just to get some credibility. It sounds a bit wankery when you say it too often in person. I'm Krista Halttunen. I am a family entrepreneur, an impact investor, and a sustainability academic. So I'm the CEO of Halton Ventures, which is our family office and investment company. Our biggest investment is that we own 100% of Halton Group, which is our family business. We make HVAC systems, so the kind of thing you see there in the ceilings. We sell them in 35 countries around the world. We have factories in 9 countries, so very global Finnish business. So my focus is on the investment side, but also a lot on the strategy of the core business. Because I have my academic background in sustainability, I've been able to bring a lot of the sustainability lens in what we do. So we do both direct and indirect investments with a focus on the built environment and especially the green transition. And the reason that why we're working on this is that if you are a family owner and you purport to care about the next generation and the longevity of your business, you absolutely have to look into the green transition, because otherwise there won't be any business or any economy to hand over to the next generation. So that's why I'm here today.
Yeah, I love that. And this is very much on your website, actually. To be in the family business is to safeguard the future. And yet ESG, impact, yes, we care about it deeply, but the reality is very different. It is under threat. Capital outflows are very, very real from ESG funds and what you care about. Give us the lay of the land here today. Is it as dire as the media tells us it is, Anna?
I'm gonna suggest you ask Krista first, and then I'll, because I know she knows it.
So if you're talking about the ESG backlash, which I think is more of a thing in the US, but it's also absolutely a thing here in Europe, I think there's a strong political agenda behind that. So my PhD research was a lot about the fossil fuel industry, and that's very well documented how the fossil fuel industry has a very strong interest in not carrying out a green transition. And they also have very strong marketing strategies for swaying public opinion and political opinion to be against the green transition. So I think there are these kinds of underlying forces. So it's not that individual people necessarily hate ESG. It's just there's so many strong interests that are worried about the transition. And a similar thing is also the DEI backlash, right? Like there are strong interests that don't see spreading out power and influence to a wider group as a good thing. So then there's this backlash that we created. In terms of what the situation is, I mean, we all hear that we live in very uncertain times. It's really hard to know what to invest in. Everything is changing all the time. But if there's one mega trend that 100% sure will not change, it's climate change. So if you're going to back one horse in the long term, I would say it's mitigating and adapting to climate change.
And also, I think maybe precisely because of and first of all, welcome to Finland, whoever is not from here, although I do see familiar faces in the audience as well. But I think, and you can also kind of raise your hand and say if you think otherwise, but I think maybe we're a little bit more, and it's also been studied, a little bit more resistant to the said sort of opinion influencing here in the Nordics. So I think maybe that's one of the reasons that it's not like a 100% trend in here. I think what's maybe currently more influencing or kind of battling for our attention is the military spending or the innovation in defense and security. And many people tend to kind of put these two in contradiction, but I'm kind of also happy about seeing emerging discourse about how there can actually be sort of co-implemented dual use, and just the fact of basically increasing demand for any industry, because defense often is an industrial solution. You can, if you're kind of smart about it, you can really couple the two strategic goals and green the industry while you're ramping up the demand. So,
and building resilience as well can be, for example, good for green energy in Europe.
Yeah. So both of you are essentially saying it is not exactly ESG fatigue. It is a lot of politically motivated capital being dampened. If there's a better word to that, let me know. But I guess, dampening of capital is really what we are seeing. But for the capital like yours, which are really focused, persistent, and committed to this agenda, where is the capital flowing? Tell us a little bit about, the kind of innovations that you're excited about.
First, one more thing about the ESG fatigue. I think sure, there's a fatigue, but it's kind of on the level of discourse. So maybe, I don't know, like we can keep talking about it, but I'm maybe, not too interested in talking about it. The Americans are forced to do what they're forced to do due to their administration, and that's a different thing. But over here, the fatigue is maybe a thing of the past, hopefully. Where the capital is flowing, actually I walked through the lobby and I heard geopolitics mentioned like several times just walking. So obviously in Finland, that's a very kind of critical issue and not to be taken lightly. So definitely a lot of the technologies. Also, we have been looking at Earth observation technologies that are now actually becoming military observation technologies, and that's definitely the dual use trend is a thing. But then if we look at climate, I think we're in Europe, we have, now it's been contested a little bit, but still we have strong regulation for keeping the planet on course and also making Europe the most competitive region in clean solutions. So then we have a lot of legislation coming up. I just spoke with someone from the building sector who was quite excited about the fact that Europe's going to have its energy efficiency regulation for buildings implemented in 2028, where you need all public buildings to be net zero and have some sort of solar panel implementation, and then all new buildings by 2030. So obviously that's going to mean we need a lot of really good innovations and solutions for super energy efficiency, like very energy efficient elevators or HVAC systems, but also a lot of new innovation. So that's one example.
Yeah, for sure. And I think in kind of these, let's say, more difficult times for ESG, one thing that's a no-brainer is different types of efficiency. So resource efficiency, energy efficiency, because it's good anyway. It's good for business. So sort of optimizing the system. I think those kinds of startups are doing really well still today. On a higher level, of course, that's not enough to actually mitigate climate change. So we also need to think about the system level changes that are needed in society and how to invest in those. So how to build a transport system that's not reliant fully on fossil fuels, for example. So that's where the long-term focus has to be. But in terms of where investors find it easy to invest at the moment, I think it's a lot of these optimizing technologies and even the kind of technologies that even our core business is making, like you say. So improving energy efficiency in the built environment. And a lot of our startups are also in this kind of a space.
Yeah, so I think what you bring up then, we talked about this earlier, about incrementalism in innovation versus real systems change, right? If you're really here to help the climate, don't create something that addresses carbon emissions, but impacts every other metric. How are you thinking about those kinds of investments, i.e. systems level investments, given you both represent essentially patient capital that maybe Tom Henriksen doesn't have?
Yeah, it's not easy. So if you think about system level change, it kind of goes against the standard of diversification, which is really common for people in finance, as the people here will know. But if you want to impact a system, such as the built environment system or the energy system, then you sort of need to focus on something and need to really understand where the leverage points are. So it's not enough to maybe invest in one startup in green energy, but maybe you need to invest in the whole ecosystem and the infrastructure and then drive change that way. So that's why, for example, we've chosen to focus quite closely around our core business where we have a lot of expertise. So the built environment space and adjacent industries, because that's where we can understand that, okay, if you change this lever, then this and this and this thing will change as well. So to build these net zero buildings, for example, it's not just one technology. So energy efficiency is not enough. Maybe we can add carbon capture, renewable energy generation. So I think the first point is to really understand the system and then how to impact it. And then that's how you can start thinking about change that's not just incremental.
Yeah, and before we go to you, Anna, I mean, just talk to us a little bit about the example of how you assess, startups and funds here for this built environment. What are you looking for to enact this kind of systems level change you're looking forward to?
It's a question of both what the fund or the firm is doing and then also how it fits into what we are doing. So obviously the fund or the company must demonstrate that they have an understanding of the real impacts of what they're trying to do. So anyone can say that they're green because everyone's meeting some sustainable development goal, right? But then having a deeper understanding of what's actually material. So again, if you are in the built environment business, then probably there has to be something about material efficiency or energy efficiency or something other than just, for example, gender equality, even though that's very important as well. But understanding how a company is impacting change that's actually material and where they operate. And then in terms of where we stand on this as a family office, we focus on things where we can bring some kind of extra value. And obviously we can contribute more and we have the connections and the expertise to help them. So then that's actually a better leverage point for us. So I think it kind of varies from investor to investor where you can make the most impact. So you need to both assess your own strengths and then the ability of the team to operate in that space.
Yeah, and talking about models, Anna, you just commissioned a very extensive model. You talk very openly about how you've been very saddened by the breach of the planetary boundaries, and you've decided to come up with this extensive framework to share with the family office group. Share with us a little bit about how you've thought about this and why you decided to create this extensive framework.
Yes, with pleasure. First, just a comment on Krista's good explanation. I was just thinking about something that a systems investor just a while ago explained about the way to look at systems, that the systems are never, or systems can be, but typically the systems that we are talking about are not a clock problem, but the cloud problem, right? So if you look at like a watch and you can see it's a pretty intricate system, but it's still quite simple, and then you can kind of take it apart and then put it back together. But if you think about like societal systems, they're more like, clouds on the sky where they shift a little bit all the time. You can't really say where they start and where they end. And I think that's the trick with the trying to be systemic and look at the systems, is also just a little bit to admit that you can never really know 100% what's the system that you're looking at, but then it's maybe, at least what we do is maybe more try to like really look at the team or the founder and see whether or what's their understanding of the system, and kind of almost the humility in the face of this system. So that's also one approach. Earth systems are also systems, and that's the systems that the planetary boundaries framework is measuring. And like you said, we are very kind of science-led and science-based in our approach, and we've been building up framework and a tool to really take into account holistically the environmental changes that are happening. So if you only look at climate, you can really easily scale something that's catastrophic for biodiversity or land use. We want to be really cognizant of the net impact of what we are funding through our portfolio. So, and another thing is the CSRD regulation, or the sustainability regulation in the European Union area. There's a backlash to that as well, and it's created maybe a disproportionate burden to the companies that are now reporting, and there's work being done there. Don't get me started on that, but what we wanted to do is to take the data that is now being reported and then to kind of really use it. Basically, we found a perfect guy who's a quant analyst, but also really kind of science and comms savvy, and he's created a tool estimating the pressures any listed portfolio puts on the planetary boundaries. So all the critical processes, it can be climate, or it's 9 boundaries. So for instance, climate, freshwater circulation, biodiversity, and 6 out of those 9 are now already breached, which it's not just sad, it's really worrying.
And so when you look at funds, when you look at investments that you're making using this framework, has it been challenging to tick all the boxes? I mean, I think the criticism, if I may, of a lot of these ESG frameworks is it becomes a ticking off the box exercise.
Yes. This is a very different approach, because you end up either you can look at the footprint, so the negative impact that you might create, which is often the case no matter how sustainable your business is. But then you can also try to emphasize the positive, the solutions that can kind of maybe bring some of the boundaries back. So that's the first thing you have to decide. Yeah. So there's a lot of choices to be made during that. But it's not you can't really do a ticking the box exercise with this one, I would say, not if you really know how to use it. We are hoping, and actually I'm pretty sure that there are other worried science-based investors who are working in a similar model for non-listed equities at the moment, and to be used on a fund. So the first version that we have is for listed companies or companies who are, for one reason or another, reporting enough of their
And this
footprint.
is something you're looking to share with the rest of the family office community to implement as well?
Thanks for the reminder. Indeed, it's there. It's on our website. It's there for everyone. And we, of course, hope that it's... our intention was to build something for ourselves, but then why not share it with others?
Yeah. And Krista, what model do you use, if at all, in framework to assess? How do you ensure you're not just ticking a box and also falling into prey of the greenwashers out there?
Yeah, very interesting. So we're a much smaller family office than the security trading is, so we probably operate on a slightly different scale. But there's a few things that I would raise, just kind of simple principles. So the first is this idea that a family investor or any investor can be green by being impact aligned, so aligning all your investments so that they fit some kind of an impact criteria, or you can be impact generating. So not just aligned to a green standard, but actually think about, is my investment actually making a difference somehow to the system that I want to impact? So, of course, you want your whole portfolio to be aligned to some kind of principles of green or sustainable or whatever your values are. But if you can also then get to this next level of impact generation, I think that's even better. So not just to check, okay, we're not making any planetary boundaries worse, but actually finding investments where you're actually improving things. So that's one lens for sure. And then, of course, again, I already talked about system change. That's very important. And then finally, again, this idea of leverage points. So where does my capital and the expertise that my company, my family office has, where would that make the most difference? And of course, maybe not all of your capital can be put at risk this way, because the most differences are often made in areas where there is the most risk, right? But at least as a family office, I think we are more entrepreneurial than maybe your standard investor. So we're not just looking at the risk-return profiles, but we're also looking at, okay, where is there an opportunity to actually make a difference? Yeah. And if you are in a position where you are an asset owner and you control capital, I think that's a really good way to also think about your impact. So could I take on a bit more risk, be a bit more entrepreneurial for something that I care about, and then maybe have a real impact in the world in the process?
Anna, what do you think in terms of the, avoiding the greenwashers and ensuring, I think what you're getting to is additionality, right? Ensuring that each dollar spent is an additional capital that only you could have brought that value.
Yeah, exactly. Or at least I can see there's a logical path from spending that money to actually doing something useful in the world, and not just being aligned to some standard, but actually having thought about the impact.
Yeah.
Yes, I think the additionality of our money versus someone else's money is also something that we are trying to kind of look case by case always when we look at new investments. Recently, we have been almost, like in our solution and impact portfolio, we've been coming more and more to decisions where we only go for environment, climate, clean tech focused funds or investments. And of course, there are many funds. You asked about greenwashing. I think there's a lot of really actually good intentions to be aligned with the planetary boundaries, to be climate. Like there is almost very little intentional greenwashing happening, but sometimes there's just the unintentional greenwashing where we're in that kind of point in time where there's a lot of wish to be like really creating real world impact, but then it's maybe not there yet. So I think in terms of trying to avoid it is you can quite often find if there's the intrinsic understanding of the system when you talk to fund managers or with the company. And then also, especially if you take a look around the stakeholders and organizations around, you can see if there's an alignment or not. But as I said, mostly it's maybe just like a case of learning together and seeing if it's actually something that can be implemented, even though at first it's not there, because as I said.
What I love about our conversation is you're imagining the future in a lens of optimism despite the worry or because of the worry, in that there's a lot more capital that can be patient enough to carry it through. Let's answer the question that is the title of our panel. How can capital today be truly catalytic in this new economy? What does that mean to you? What is catalytic capital? Where should it be spent in your mind?
My understanding is that there's quite a lot of what we call patient capital in the LP Summit and in the room. And the simplest answer from my perspective is just that you can that's your additionality. If you can be patient, if you can be flexible in your terms for something that you see really can make a difference in 10, 15, 20 years. That's definitely what we need right now. So I have a project in the philanthropy that looks at this catalytic capital for climate solutions precisely. And so there we see that even like both from a return and an impact point of view, you actually get both the impact and the return only after we've commercialized, right? Because the curve is so steep. So we have quite a lot of money going to the early stage, seed really good innovations. But then when we don't have enough money to scale all those innovations or even the top, 20 of them, we kind of lose the impact of those solutions. So I think what family offices can do, maybe we're looking at if also foundations can do this, is to really be there for that commercialization, the first of a kind bit of a little bit later stage of the climate technologies. So that's one like really concrete example where we can be catalytic for climate.
Yeah, and Krista, is there, verticals that you think, with the patient capital that we have, that we should be investing in to be truly catalytic to solve some of the biggest issues we're faced with?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think there's a bit of a vacuum for value-based leadership in the world in general. And of course, it's not the fault of the finance world, but I think we can all do our part in trying to hold steady in some values as the world is changing around us. So one point is, of course, that in a lot of types of industries, it's not realistic to develop a company from basically zero to completely profitable and making a big difference in like a 5-year time span. So I think I'm just echoing what you said, but especially in a lot of these industrial applications, energy, infrastructure, built environment, it's very, very important that there are different types of investors involved. So not just maybe the typical venture investor who needs a quick exit, but also investors that can look a bit beyond and see that, okay, we can develop good long-term business, but it might take a bit longer than what we're used to. And I think in all of these systems and in all of these fields, there are huge gaps in funding if you think about what is needed to actually have a hope for a functioning society in the future. I mean, we keep talking about this, but it's just simply the fact that unless we have some kind of a transition, a lot of economic value and just people's livelihoods and societies and all of that value is also going to be lost. So I think there's an impetus on all of us to look at where we can impact. For us, it is mostly in the built environment space, and then be a bit patient, a bit more strategic on where to invest, rather than just always chasing the newest trend.
Yeah, so the newest trend being something like AI?
Well, I mean, AI is a tool, right? You can use it for good or you can use it for bad. And I'm not an expert on this, but I think one thing about AI is that we need to be mindful on what it's used for. So is it something that helps us as a society, brings additional value, or are we just building huge energy drains, resource drains?
Right. That's using a lot of energy.
Yeah, and then like, for me, that's something very important. So I think there's very good applications for AI, very good developments there, but it's important to also think about what it's being used for.
Yes.
I want to echo that a little bit, just because that's what I think about often quite a lot, that AI is going to provide us with even bigger scale, like even more exponential scale. So then we should be even more kind of cognizant and really think about what it is that we actually want to scale, because then it's going to like sort of happen anyway with the help. So you want to be mindful.
So you were saying rather than scaling scheduling in our lives and using AI tools for that, we should be implementing it in ways that also help our environment. How have you seen that actually? Have you seen real credible applications of AI in the worlds that you're investing in? Or is it just like an application layer and everybody has a .ai and gets the funding today?
Well, I think this is an interesting question of how do we define AI? So there's a lot of this hype now around the large language models, which is one part of AI, but there's all kinds of, like at what point does a machine learning algorithm become AI? And I think the kind of industrial applications of that and optimizing systems and planning things are very different from the kind of ChatGPT thing that maybe we're more familiar with. So I'm not like a technical expert, but I'm sure there are lots of good applications of AI-type technologies, but they might not be the most hyped up ones right now because it's not what we're all seeing in our day-to-day lives.
Yeah, and AI it's definitely happening. It's consuming a lot of energy. The claim is that this increased demand in energy is gonna transform the energy, basically make the transition final to the clean energy, but at the same time we are electrifying our transport, we are producing green steel with clean energy. So if I was to come up with a new business today, I would totally go for the clean energy or the grid, because there's like it's coming from multiple directions and it's going to happen, but we really need those solutions.
Yeah, and talking about solutions, I mean more specifically to inspire, to hopefully walk home with some inspiration here despite the ecological crisis. What are you inspired by? What are you seeing on the ground? You know, what are people fixing in the built environment that we, you know, because we're investing in gaming and everything else, that we don't see?
I'm just back from Sweden, where I visited SSABs and a couple of other big companies. Steel production plant, or actually it was it's an old production plant. So I was also walking into the blast furnace, which is a technology that was created like 1,000 years ago. But now they are very kind of energetically and proudly transforming that entire old plant to be working with electric arc furnaces, so fossil-free. And then also they have a smaller pilot plant where they're already producing small amounts of totally fossil-free green steel. So I was bouncing this bouncy ball that was made of fossil-free steel, which is super cool, because steel as an industry is 1/10 of global emissions. So it's huge. So I'm quite happy. I was quite happy, a happy camper bouncing that ball. Yeah.
How about you, Krista?
Yeah, I will also say, I don't have as tangible an example, but in the world where we're so excited about software, and there is lots of exciting software, and I don't want to blame anyone who's investing in this, But I'm very excited by people who are actually developing physical solutions and then scaling those up. So new building materials are more sustainable, more recyclable, or incorporating carbon capture into buildings to actually reduce our carbon footprint or even make it negative, or optimizing the energy use of buildings. There's so much scope for this around Europe, and we are also involved in a few very interesting startups in this space. So more and more, I like to invest in teams that are physically doing something and changing the infrastructure, because then you can see the impact and it's very tangible and you know that it's there. And there are a lot of people working on this, so I am very hopeful about that.
Yeah. Maybe it's not surprising that an HVAC family person and an elevator family person are super excited about hardware.
Yeah, we're all proper from the old school industry, so it's understandable, right? But I think there's something there. Like, these are very old industries, they're very slow to change, but there's a lot of push now for change, and it's very exciting. There's a lot of opportunity, so any startup investors can also look at these kind of old industries and how they can be made more efficient, because it's very exciting and interesting.
Yeah.
And can be done.
Yeah, so if there's a magic wand, I mean, just to end on a positive note here, if there was a magic wand in both of your hands to encourage investors to invest in a certain way, to put more capital to work in this particular niche, being as specific and as tangible as possible, where would you wand your magic wand?
Actually, I'm gonna derail from the hardware and say that I'm really hoping to see a lot more of the sharing economy solutions, because I think that's also basically, no matter how much we create green energy or green steel, we still need to kind of think a little bit about how much stuff we want here. So I would go for that.
Sharing economy, I like that. Krista?
Yeah, maybe related. I think very relevant here in Finland is just this whole idea of circularity, circular economy. So we talk about it a lot, but it's very underdeveloped in Finland compared to a lot of even our neighboring countries. So I would like to see a lot more of this thinking. And it might also mean that it's not enough that investors do something, but investors who want to make change need to also work with other actors, civil society, even policymakers, to kind of bring in the system change that we need. So I would almost encourage people who really want to make change to be a bit of an activist investor. So not just follow trends, but also think about where you can lead. Maybe it's circular economy, maybe it's better materials, better energy use. There's so many opportunities there.
Yeah. And we have time for one question. Do we have a question in the audience before we go to the next session? Anulika.
I love listening to this panel and listening to the wonderful ideas coming from you. When we think about catalytic capital, it does what it says on the tin. It catalyzes. So you need to be able to bring a significant amount of others along with you. And I love what you're saying about systems change. I've worked within this for over a decade now. So with respect to your impact, how are you thinking about where your euros or dollars are best served? And where are you seeing the ability to leverage and garner others to come along with you on the sort of on the purposes that mean most to you and your family office?
I actually love this question because this was something I forgot to mention, even though it was in my notes. So exactly, so trying to encourage others to come along with you. I mean, even speaking at events like this. Yeah. So there's several angles to this. So for example, the family office world, especially in Finland, is quite small. So I find it quite inspiring to meet other people who maybe don't realize that they have a lot of power in their hands in what they invest in, and try to bring those kinds of people. So I'm saying that not all the catalysis is necessarily financial. So there's also other things that we have at our disposal, our networks, our businesses. We're doing a lot also just through our business and the strategic target setting from our core business and their suppliers and partners. So that's really important. But I think there's no one answer to like where to put the money, right? There's so many potential options. But I'm going to come back to this idea that just going where we have expertise, where we have understanding, where we can contribute more than anyone else, and then in the process trying to inspire different types of actors, even if we don't agree on everything, to at least work together on the things that we do agree on. So hopefully the green transition, for example.
Can I just add that sort of what she said, and then on the point of cooperation, I think that's sort of a missing piece that I know we are, as we speak, there are different mechanisms being built for instance, for the most patient capital to be de-risking, actually, like different sorts of mechanisms for that. I know there are like the Breakthrough Energies building one, Trellis Climate is building one, Elemental Impact in the States, they are kind of having these mechanisms put in place, and we're really eager to see where that goes.
Yeah. Yes.
No, I'm Thomas Dew. I'm from Venture Lab in Norway, which is also a family office. I have a question for Krista. So we know that the construction industry is probably around 40% of total CO2, right? And it's growing with 100% between now and 2060. You mentioned HVAC systems, right? So hot and cold, which is about 30% of that. A massive bad impactor on the environment. So going back to the HVAC part and in early, like maybe even pre-construction, where do you see AI, physics, etc., coming into the total picture? Do you see any ability to change that prior to construction or impact it prior to construction? I guess that's my question. Could go to both of you.
Well, this has a lot to do with Halton Group, our core business, which literally builds HVAC systems. And our competitive edge for years and years has been energy efficiency, so demand-based ventilation and cooling. So you use as little energy as possible. And that can actually cut emissions by 30% in a professional kitchen, for example. So it's very significant, as you say. And I think a lot of it does come into play at the design stage. I don't know if you need AI for that. Maybe you can do it a bit more optimal. But the way that already some of our, not me, but some of our engineers are doing it is already making a big difference. There's also an interesting question though about retrofitting. So we can't keep building all these new buildings. So how do we retrofit these kinds of solutions to what we already have?
And a final question.
Final question, Svete.
I think it was mentioned already briefly in the panel, but if a family office in the audience is listening to you and they want to start investing sustainably, where do they start? What is the easiest kind of actionable item that they should do?
Use Anna's framework.
Yeah, well, yes. I mean, I think super easy. Clean energy is, we need, someone says, an abundance, which is true, but maybe wrong choice of word for my taste. But I think at least what happened with us is basically first we just kind of got acquainted with the science behind it, but there's loads of help for that. But I think clean energy, super easy, and circularity, which Krista mentioned.
Yeah, and maybe find partners to work with. So get an expert to talk to your family office about this from like a university background, or partner with a GP that clearly has, I mean, maybe you can't exactly evaluate which one is the best one yet, but at least someone who has a clear mandate in sustainability. So you don't have to do everything alone. Like there's so many people working in this field and so much expertise. So
find friends from the peers like we have.
Yeah, and actually I want to mention in the US, something that's evolving really quickly is families coming together. So if you've heard of the firm Iconic, they manage like Zuckerberg's wealth and all of that. Not only do they have 84 billion assets under management, they are also building collabs, which is where the families come together to invest to solve the problem. And what I've been inspired with, both of you, is you start from the beginning, right? Which is what is the problem we're trying to solve, and what is the current system? How do we change the status quo? Versus, I think what a lot of tech investing does, which is forces us to look at incremental innovation more than anything, and at the rate where we're changing, so much is evolving, and yet both of you lead forward telling us that climate investing is not dead. It is evolving, and we have to adapt. And I'm grateful for both of you leading and using your voice and using your legacy as a lever for growth. And with that, round of applause, ladies and gentlemen, for Dr. Krista and Anna Herlin. Thank you so much.
And thanks so much for tuning in this week. You can subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and follow our socials on Sarah Chen Global to get the latest on the show. It would really help me out too if you enjoyed this to rate and review our show on Apple Podcasts and share your favorite episodes with a friend. I'm Sarah Chen-Spellings, and you've been listening to $1 Billion Moves.